In this lesson, we're going to talk about program flow. And this is where we start making our programs smarter. The first thing we're going to talk about is using expressions and operators. These are the different symbols we use to perform math or assignment, or we test comparisons, and also increment and decrement. We're going to talk about all of those because as soon as you understand that, it makes the rest of our work considerably easier. If you don't understand the different expressions and operators, then doing an if statement or doing a loop is going to be much more difficult. We're then going to talk about using a decision statement. And a decision statement is if, then, else. So if some condition is true, then perform something. And the neat thing is that we as humans do if statements every single day, and we do thousands of them. If I hit my snooze bar 3 more times, then I'm going to be late for work, else I won't. Well, these are the types of things that we do inside of our code as well. If some condition is met, then branch off and do something else, or do this. We then have our iteration statements. Iteration statements is just a neat way of saying looping. And we have multiple ways of looping within C#. And that's what a computer is ideal for. Computers are fantastic at doing mundane tasks over and over and over again. And we're going to learn how to do that. And then finally, we have functions and methods. We're going to get into this a little bit more detail, but basically a function and method is a means for us as developers to make our code easier to read and easier to understand by breaking out our code into a more modular design. So let's look at this. Expressions come in 4 different types. The first one is one that we've already used. It's called our assignment. An assignment is nothing more than just the equal sign. We've been using this for our variables. If I declare an integer variable and I want it to be equal to 55, well, the equal sign says I want this variable to be equal to this value. We then have our mathematical symbols. Our mathematical expressions are add, subtract, multiply, divide, and then we have a percent sign. The percent sign is mod. What mod does is it performs a division, but it only returns a remainder. And this is a fantastic tool, especially if you want to find out if anything's like a base 2 or whatnot. And then we have our increment and decrement. The increment and decrement statements or expressions are shorthand to work with our variables, or work with basically anything for that matter. If we want to increment it by 1, you use the plus plus. Subtract it by 1, use a plus plus. If I want to add 5 to a variable, plus equals 5. If I want to subtract 5, minus equals 5. It's a shorthand. It makes it much easier for us to write code quicker and also make it more meaningful. So we just don't have to type nearly as much. And then finally, we have our comparison. And this is where most new developers have trouble with C#. Our comparisons are doubled for the most part. So equal, if I want to test if variable A is equal to variable B, I use the equal sign. I don't use equal. If I use a single equal, I'm saying variable A equals variable B. If I want to test a comparison, I do the equal. So there's a big difference. And the way I always remember this is if I wanted to say it's not equal, is this not equal to another one? Then I use the bang or the exclamation point and an equal. Then you have your greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. So we have a lot of different types of expressions that we're going to work with. Now, mathematical expressions. Mathematical expressions, they all make sense because we've been doing it forever, especially if you've been using Microsoft Excel or any other spreadsheet for that matter. We use mathematical expressions all the time. So I value equals 15 plus 15. That's 30. 75 minus 25. Multiplication, divide. And notice the last one where it says 5 mod 2. And that returns 1 because that's how many remainder. That's what our remainder is if we were to divide 5 by 2. It's 2 with a remainder of 1. It's a very cool feature. I can't stress it enough. I use mod quite a bit. Increment and decrement operators. So here are some examples. If I have the statement I value equals I value plus 1, I can do I value plus plus. Same thing. But then notice right below on my shorthand I have plus plus I value. Now what this is for is the I value plus plus says I'm going to look at that value, and after I've used it, I will add 1 to it. I will increment it by 1. If you have the plus plus I value, that says I'm going to increment it and then test it. Consequently, we have the minus minus. So I value equals I value minus 1. You can have I value minus minus, which says I'm going to evaluate it. So it might be equal to 5. And as soon as I've looked at it and I've evaluated it, I'm going to convert it to a 4. The other one says before I ever look at it, I'm going to subtract 1 from it. And then you can have like I value equals I value plus 5. So if you want to do that, you can say I value plus equals 5. So it's a shorthand method for adding and subtracting values from a variable. It's ideal. And again, we have our minus as well. Our comparison operators. The comparison operators, like I said, are used to test whether something is equal or not equal or whatnot. So you have the equal that says, does this equal? Does A equal B? And it's going to return a true or a false. These are always going to be a Boolean return. It's either true, the condition is either true or it's false. So does it equal? Is it not equal? Is it greater than or equal to, less than, or less than or equal to? The greater than and all the way down to the less than or equal to, that's where a lot of beginning programmers have issues. We're going to talk about that. So let's go look at some code. So if you open up your mathematical expressions lesson, or actually project, here we have inside of main, we have our variables being defined up at the top. We have 5 double variables, denum1 all the way down to result. And so now I'm going to perform some simple math. So my simple math, dResult, is going to equal denum1, so the value of 1 plus 2 divided by 3 times 4. Now you can look at this and you can think about what that's going to return. It's not going to return what you think. And then down below we have parentheses. So let's just run this so you can see the code, so you can see what the result is. Again, let me change my font. So the simple math says 1 plus 2 divided by 3 times 4 is equal to 3.6666666 all the way to 7. And you're probably thinking to yourself, that's not right. And actually it is. It is correct. But with the other one, it says it's 2.25. And that's probably what you thought was going to happen. The reason why this math up here isn't what you think it was going to be is because of the order of precedent. The order of precedent is what order, what mathematical symbols take precedent over another one. So the way it works is multiplication and division take precedent over addition and subtraction. And so the way this works is 2 divided by 3 is 0.66666 whatever. Times 4 gives you 2.6666 whatever. And then you add 1. So that's why we get 3.6 all the way to 7. Here, in the second example, the math is going to take place in a totally different order. Anything inside the parentheses always takes precedent over anything else. So the first thing it does is it says, all right, 1 plus 2 is 3. 3 divided by 4 is 0.75. So 3 times 0.75 gives you 2.25. And that's how your mathematics works. So keep that in mind, especially when you start doing your math. You might get some results and you might not understand why it's doing this. As a matter of fact, with one of the examples I did, it always came back 0, and it's because the way the math was being done, I was getting 0, and then when I'd multiply it, well, anything times 0 is going to be 0. So this is just something that you need to be aware of with our mathematicals. So When you're working inside of C#, you need to keep track of the difference between your mathematical symbols and your comparison equations. So keep that in mind. We're going to start jumping into the next part, which is a lot more fun when we start working with our decision statements.